Hey, I'm Nick DiMatteo, and welcome to Music is Not a Genre's PODFAST. We're going to get right into it today because it's a very, very special PODFAST. It's a bit unprecedented, and the topic, it's PODFAST number 34, and the topic is Israeli and Palestinian music, Sound Without Borders, Part 1. Yeah, you heard me right. It's part 1. So thank you as always for watching and listening. Listeners, go to youtube.com/@musicisnotagenre. You get a video for every episode of this podcast. Watchers, go to nickdimatteo.com/musicisnotagenre if you'd rather just listen. And everyone, go to patreon.com/musicisnotagenre to support this podcast, my band Rec, and everything I do. Of course, like, share, subscribe, rate, review. Please do that. And please, if you can't do any of that, just tell somebody about this podcast. It's amazing what word of mouth does, and I would really love it if you told anybody really that you heard about this awesome podcast, Music is Not a Genre, that covers all kinds of music and goes all over the world, and they should listen to it. That would be real, help to me, as it is to all indie creators. I have a merch store, nickdimatteo.com/shop. If you go there, I got a bunch of new designs, and we just talked about them. I actually don't know when this is airing, so it's either right before or after this. I talked about logos, got a bunch of logos and other line art designs there. And then, of course, if you're struggling to write a song, I have a special musician's rate for the Song Coach now. Go to nickdimatteo.com/thesongcoach, book a free 15-minute consult, and for as little as $150, I will help you with your song. So please consider all of that stuff. And of course, nickdimatteo.com/music to check out all of the music I create with my band Rec and the various other projects. So let's get right back to it. The topic, again, is PODFAST number 34, Israeli and Palestinian music, Sound Without Borders. And as I said, this is part 1 because as is unprecedented for a PODFAST, I am going to split this into 2 parts. Actually, no, it's not unprecedented. I did it a couple of years ago with my $50,000 manifesto, kind of, or, mostly in a sense. But I felt like with this one, I needed to break it up because the more I researched, the more information I found. And I didn't want to, shirk either side of this. So, yes, the subtitle is Sound Without Borders. So I'm sure you can figure out why I'm doing this. And my hope is that it will attract people from both sides of the argument. Pause. I don't mean both sides of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. I do not mean that. Whatever side, let's say you take, or whatever, however you think about it's not what I mean. I mean these 2 sides. Side 1, people who believe these countries are more alike than not, and despite their differences, the citizens mostly just want to live in peace, thrive, and be left alone to live their lives without imperialist or oppressive governments or other political organizations messing up everything in the name of power or righteousness or religion. And side 2, people who feel the need to pick a side and support in the war, whether they're Zionist or pro-Palestinian, to the detriment of the other side, and even demonization of the other side, and are not into mixing and comparing and finding common ground. I would love comments from and discussions with both of these people and anyone in between. If you're like, oh man, bring it on, I want to hear about the commonalities between Israeli and Palestinian music and etc., I want to hear from you. If you're like, how dare you do this? How dare you put these 2 countries together in the same podcast and 2 weeks in a row? I want to hear from you too. Or if you're somewhere in between, whether or not it's about the music, though of course this podcast will be about the music, though, and if you ask, I am clearly in the first camp. I'm not a big fan of division. I'm not going to go into the politics of it, but you'll hear a little bit more about that in the disclaimers. So the show format, why am I doing this? The history of both countries, musically speaking, some current Israeli artists and recommendations, my favorites and other things, and if you like kind of things, artists they sound like this, and then some conclusions, and then that's it for this week. In part 2, I will do current Palestinian artists, some cross-border artists and groups, some side-by-side comparisons between the 2 countries, some global conclusions, questions, and a challenge to you. So stay tuned for all the second part of that next week. Sources here: Google, Wikipedia, my ears, amar-foundation.org, jerusalemstory.com, and my good friend and colleague and frequent guest Steve Erickson, who made some key suggestions, and I will shout him out when those suggestions come up. Disclaimers: this is not a comprehensive coverage of either country. Just like what I did with my my podcast on other countries, there was no way to comprehensively cover any of those countries. This is a survey as usual. I will be diving a little deeper into these two because there are only 2 countries instead of the 25 or 26 I did then. But I can't cover all the amazing artists coming out of these countries, neither historically nor now. They're far too large of a list, but it will be a healthy cross-section that will illustrate both diversity and commonality. This is not about American or British or Canadian or Australian artists with a heritage from Israel or Palestine, or they're Jewish or they're Muslim. It's not about people in the diaspora who represent those cultures. This is artists from those actual countries or representing those countries, okay? This will not be a general history of these countries or their conflict, though I will mention it a little bit in the history when it's germane. This will not be I said that. I will probably mispronounce some names. In other words, I was talking to Steve recently about how I take pride in pronouncing things well. I'm a voiceover artist, etc., and come to find more and more that I am making little mistakes here and there and have done through the life of this podcast. Call me out if I'm pronouncing something incorrectly. That's totally fine. Again, I will mention politics, but only when relevant. I am not dismissing or making light of the terrible situation in those countries, and though my intention is to point out the connections and parallels for a very, strong purpose, I know that the situations themselves are not fully parallel. And that said, I won't be really getting into those differences, as that would be more for a political podcast. This is a music podcast. Finally, as you may know, I am neither Jewish nor Muslim. So I'm not speaking as a part of one of those cultures, but I am a thinking, feeling human being who pays attention to both current events and history, what we all seem to forget. I'm no expert by any means, but I believe my opinions, should they pop up, as they have already, are well-reasoned and respectful. But if you disagree, please feel free to comment. The intro done. Let's get into the first section here. Why this topic? As you probably know by now, MxG here, Music is Not a Genre, is a music podcast that welcomes connection with the rest of the world. Politics, social issues, religion, philosophy, sex, gender, etc. I talk primarily about music. Overwhelmingly about music, but all of those other topics do come into play when it makes sense. This episode is not only a perfect example of that, it might be the epitome of it. I have done other episodes that have been largely politically or socially motivated and have made parallels, genre, gender, things like that. But this one, it's hard to get away from the politics of this. Yes, I am doing this as an offshoot of the Music from Other Countries episode, but based on my framing, I'm sure you can clearly see that I'm also doing it to make a point. It's an age-old point that might seem trite to some, but it's still, to me, the most important point. In all of life, yes, I said that, and in every aspect of existence, it may actually be the meaning of life, and that is... Pause for drum roll. Only connect. Yeah, it sounds trite. Now, while this is a partial quote from Ian Forster, it has been misframed to imply far more than its original intent, like on dorm room posters and T-shirts and stuff like that, especially in the 80s and 90s. I stand by this as being the closest thing to the true meaning of life. Why? What's the point of being a sentient human creature in a world containing billions of other sentient human creatures, except that we're supposed to share this world, and further, we're supposed to create a shared experience of the world, and further, that the world itself exists because of this shared experience. So that's why I'm doing this. Heady, yes. Fun, yes. But enough philosophy. Why do I bring this up? Because both this episode and my podcast on the whole, it's right there in the name, Music is Not a Genre, no borders. They're meant to illustrate and forge connections. And since this ridiculous conflict grounded in issues that are both very important and very, they make sense, and some just high-flying religious issues that constantly tear, countries and people apart. But this conflict has flared up yet again. And I say flared up, why? Decades and decades of conflict off and on. What better time and what better way to emphasize connection over division than to cover both of these countries' musical histories, legacies, and current music artists together? So while, of course, both Israel and Palestine could have their music covered in one full episode each, or 10 or 100, with any country rich in history, I'm deliberately doing them together to provoke conversation. Again, either people wanting more connection and loving this approach, or people needing to express their version of why this ongoing division is somehow right and vital. Either way, I am super excited. I get to learn more, and I did learn more about the music from that region, and I hope you're excited about this too. So, the music histories. That's the first section here. Before we get into my favorite parts, will be to dive into modern music artists. We're going to do that. It's going to be a condensed parallel history of music in what are now Israel and Palestine. Israel, I say, stretching from ancient roots up through the late 20th century. Again, I'll go into 21st century music and artists in the next section and next week. I'm doing both countries' histories together to further illustrate how intertwined they are. So some ancient and pre-modern roots from the biblical era up to around the 1800s, they had shared musical foundations. They had a shared culture for a very large part of it. Not that it was without conflict even then, but they were in the same region, a lot of shared commonalities. Long before modern national identities, the region functioned as a continuous cultural soundscape shaped by liturgical chant, Jewish and early Christian traditions. So you can think of Gregorian chant, things like that, a religious chant. Arabic makam modal system, oral folk traditions, weddings, work songs, storytelling. Music was mostly monophonic through this period, at least in the first several hundred years, couple thousand years, let's say. It was a single melodic line with some accompaniment. I think depending on what kind of music you're talking about, it did have a little bit more complexity than is often cited in books. And it's partly because we don't have many extant works from those eras. But it's similar to Gregorian chant, as I mentioned, in many ways. It's built around microtonal scales, similar to other music from the southeastern hemisphere. So we're talking about, instead of C to C sharp, halftones, what's in between C and C sharp. It was transmitted transmitted orally rather than written. Some representative musical figures from this long period, of course, in the Israeli Jewish tradition, you have King David, who, if you know anything about the Bible and the Hebrew Bible, whether it's Christian or Hebrew, we'll say the Old Testament, as a lapsed Catholic here, it's symbolic because King David wrote the Psalms, supposedly, and that those were songs. They talk about things being sung, etc. There's a harp and lyre tradition. In the Palestinian and Arab tradition, you have ziryab, not Palestinian specifically, but foundational to broader Arab Andalusian musical systems influencing the region. And at this stage, there's no real need to say there is a separation of musical styles, just variations of a shared musical language. And of course, ironically so, because the languages themselves were eventually quite different. The Ottoman era, so from the 1500s to the early 1900s, a unified but stratified musical culture. So under the Ottoman Empire, music in the region splits into urban art music, so like Arabic makam, courtly traditions, rural folk music, dabka rhythms, which I'll bring up again later, and communal singing, and religious music, of course, Jewish liturgy and Sufi traditions. Jewish communities like this Sephardic and Mizrahi, and Arab communities often shared instruments such as the oud, the kanun, and the darbuka. Again, I don't know if I'm pronouncing all of these correctly. Modal systems such as makam. Representative artists from this period, the Palestinian Arab side, you have Yusuf al Manyalawi from 1847 to 1911 was his life, and he was a pioneer of commercial recordings of Arab music, having recorded a bunch of songs in 1905. And he represents kind of the broader Arab classical tradition that influenced Palestine. Jewish tradition, there was no clear parallel, but here are two that are close. Rabbi Yitzhak Al-Ghazi, a.k.a. Sem Tov Sikar, born 1889, died 1950, well known for his efforts to integrate musical ideas from both cultures. And then Yusuf Zarour, of 1902 to 1969, well-known kanun player, string instrument, and orchestra director who actually recorded the music. So again, in this history, Jewish and Arab music in the region were intertwined through maqam-based systems, even if performed in different communities, different languages. Early recording era and national awakening, so the 1900s, 1940s, getting close to the modern era, divergence begins. Recording technology rising, national identities rising. Palestinian Arab music was strongly tied into the broader Arab cultural world, Cairo, Beirut. The development of tarab, emotional, improvisational vocal music. Radio is key to spreading that. And the Jewish Yishuv pre-Israeli music, emergence of Hebrew folk revival, influenced by Eastern European melodies and local Middle Eastern sounds. Real nice mix of those two. Music used to be used to build a new national identity. It was helpful in that, as it is in all countries in one way or another. Representative artists on the Palestinian side, Mohammed Abdel Wahab, 1902 to 1991, romantic and patriotic singer and actor, composed more than 1,800 songs. Very influential across the Arab world, including Palestine. On the Israeli side, or the Yishuv side, Braka Zafira, 1910 to 1990, pioneering Israeli folk singer, songwriter, musicologist, and actor who fused diasporic Jewish sounds with local influences, which a lot of the artists from these countries do, fuse the more global sounds with local influences. And this is where the split starts. Statehood and displacement era, 1940s to 60s, defined by the aftermath of the 1948 Arab-Israeli War. Israeli music, creation of a national folk canon, hora dances, collective singing, military bands, and radio shape the sound. Strong European influence, especially Russian and Eastern European. For the Palestinian music becomes a vehicle for memory, loss, identity preservation. Folk traditions, especially Dabka, which is still there today, gain symbolic importance. Representative artists on the Israeli side, Naomi Shemer, 1930 to 2004, an Israeli songwriter, composer, and performer, known as the First Lady of Israeli Song, created music for adults and children, and truly helped to shape the Israeli songbook. Look up her song, Jerusalem of Gold, as national identity through song. On the Palestinian side, you have Mustafa Al-Kurd, 1945 to 2024. And this is a quote from the website JerusalemStory.com. A prominent Palestinian musician, composer, and actor. While deeply rooted in his native Jerusalem, he blended widely diverse musical traditions, including classical Arabic oud music, Sufi chants, Byzantine singing, European organ music, and Palestinian folklore. What a mix. In so doing, he created a unique genre of contemporary Palestinian political revolutionary music that, quote unquote, laid the foundation of the nationalist song and earned him the moniker Voice of Palestine. So there was a real divergence there in the purposes of music and in the styles as their national identities took hold. And from 1960s to 80s, the pop, rock, and Arab modernism in the Israeli scene, in that period, they started to absorb Western rock, pop, and jazz, which has influenced a lot of the modern people I'll talk about. A gradual reintroduction of Middle Eastern sounds after an early suppression of it. They were trying to modernize, and now they kind of brought those sounds back. Rise of singer-songwriters and bands. So real scenes there in Israel. Palestinian scene, deep connection to pan-Arab icons, growth of politically conscious music, and folk and orchestral and poetic songwriting. Some representative artists, one from each country. Israeli, Arik Einstein, 1939 to 2013, is a singer-songwriter, actor who's the voice of Israel. One of the most influential Israeli artists of all time, recorded over 500 songs and helped define Israeli rock and pop. Palestinian Marcel Khalifa, 1950, still alive, born in 1950, composer, singer, and oud player, considered a folk hero, known as the Bob Dylan of the Middle East. He set Mahmoud Darwish poetry to music, hugely influential culturally. So both sides are modernizing, but Israel is aligning in many ways, not completely, but more with Western sounds, and Palestine is kind of still remaining tied to the Arab classical and poetic traditions. And then the late 20th century, 80s to 90s, this is the bridge to the modern Israeli music. There's an explosion of genres: rock, pop, electronic. Mizrahi music finally becomes mainstream. There's an increasing globalization. Palestinian music, there's an emergence of early hip-hop influences, Indian underground scenes, and there's a continued emphasis on identity and resistance. Some representative artists from Israel: Ofra Haza, in 1957 to 2000, she was a singer-songwriter and actor known as the Madonna of the East, or the Israeli Madonna, ranked in 2023 in Rolling Stone as the 186th greatest singer of all time. I'm not sure which Rolling Stone. Hugely successful. Her voice was sampled in hip-hop. She was on soundtracks, etc. It was a really nice fusion of traditional and global pop. Traditional music and global pop. Palestine, you have Sabrine, which was a band founded in 1980, and it was developing Palestinian modern song and reflecting the humanitarian and cultural reality through that music and the suffering as well. They released 5 albums from 1984 to 2002. I believe they're still together in some form. They bridge traditional Arab music with modern arrangement and political themes. And of course, this era, the end of the last century, sets up everything that follows, which brings us to the modern era, which brings us to today's artists. Now, again, this is part 2. This is part 1. I'm doing a 2-part PODFAST here. And I will be doing the Israeli artists this week and summing that up, and then doing the Palestinian artists next week, and then some other things that kind of go together between the two countries after that. So this is kind of a broad cross-genre, again, a survey of modern era artists, roughly around the year 2000 to now, basically. And these are the artists from Israel, modern Israeli artists. Big note. Every single one of the artists I will mention this week and next week, they are all streaming on the major streaming services. They're on YouTube. They are easy to find. There's no excuse here. Note these down and look them up. Pause the podcast, look them up. So I'm doing, I think, 13 or 14. I'm going to go alphabetically. Here we go. Omer Adam, mainstream pop mixed with folk, orchestral, and R&B and beats elements. Great voice. All the lyrics and titles are in Hebrew, so I'm not sure what to recommend. I would just go down the list of whatever streaming service you use of kind of the top 10, and you'll get a real flair and flavor. Sounds somewhat like smooth pop artists like Enrique Iglesias or Ricky Martin, with that kind of traditional country sound, though his crossover hip-hop stuff is more like Post Malone or Drake. And by the way, I will tell you who my favorite artists are later on towards the end of this week's episode. The Asaf Avidan, indie folk and rock with some funky elements, sung most or all in English. It's kind of like Ed Sheeran or Mumford mixed with Jeff Buckley. The voice is Jeff Buckley. My God, almost a countertenor. I like his sound. Any of the streaming songs are worth checking out, but I vote for Reckoning Song and Lost Horse. Check out, again, Asaf Avidan, Reckoning Song, and Lost Horse. Elan Eder, singer-songwriter, singing in Hebrew. Song titles are also in Hebrew, so you have to kind of take your pick. I do like it's a nice laid-back acoustic sound. Very nice, easy to listen to. If you like Mac DeMarco, I think you'll like Elan Eder. Garden City Movement. They're an indie chillwave EDM band. English lyrics. Chill dance, as you'd expect from that kind of music. And I would recommend Untouchable and Foreign Affair. So if you can think of any kind of chill wave artists, though, that's sort of the way they sound. So if you're into like indie chill wave, EDM, kind of laid back EDM, Garden City Movement. Infected Mushroom is a psytrance EDM kind of Balearic band. They also sing in English. Great, glitchy dance stuff. I love it. If you don't know, Israel is known for loving dance, loving house, loving techno. You know, they have a big dance scene over there. Recommendation here, it would be Becoming Insane, which is a really great song. And the Foo Fighters cover The Pretender, which I put on my playlist. I put a couple of these, I put this one on my playlist because it's a great cover version of that song. I mean, imagine Foo Fighters done kind of techno. If you like The Prodigy, you'll like this band. Noga Erez is alt-pop, electronic, and hip-hop, English lyrics. Kind of like Charlie XCX or MIA. She's got a great sound. I would recommend the songs Vandalist, Bubbling, and End of the Road. The Noga Erez. Yossi Fine, I think it's Yossi Fine, or it might be Fine, Fine. Kind of a funk, reggae, global music, hip-hop fusion artist. He sounds great, just a great freaking sound. Sings both in English and in Hebrew. I would recommend the songs Ten Lo and Hatish Makoli, but really any song on that list works. It's all just such a great sound. Think of Bootsy Collins mixed with Richie Havens and Bob Marley, and you kind of get the flavor. Lola Marsh, who's an indie pop folk singer in English, really nice sound. I would recommend Only for a Moment and Wishing Girl. So if you think of kind of a laid back indie pop sound, take your pick of any of the Western artists that match that. That's what she's going for here. And since she's in English, and honestly, Lola Marsh could be played on anywhere on any, playlist here in the West. Netta, electro-pop, experimental pop with an Eastern flair. Her music could easily sit alongside any Western pop. It's very compelling and very, very good. Sings in both Hebrew and English. It's kind of like a mix of Charlie XCX with Kesha with MIA. Check out Toy, the song Toy, or her cover of You Spin Me Round by Dead or Alive. That's also on my playlist. Really like the version. Okay. Orphaned Land, band recommended by Steve Erickson. It's very, very dramatic, big sounding metal band with lots of folk and choral elements. They sing in English. If you like Opeth, I think you would like them. I would recommend the songs All Is One and The Cave. So check those out. And these are, by the way, in alphabetical order. I think I said that as close as I could get to that anyway. Ravid Plotnik, who is a Hebrew hip-hop artist, a rapper, chill as hell. Great flow. No idea what he's saying, but I love his flow. These song titles are also in Hebrew, so I don't know what to recommend, but any of the songs are worth listening to. If you like Mac Miller and or Action Bronson, I would recommend Ravid Plotnik. Coming towards the end here, Shy Maestro, who is that's Shy S-H-A-I. It's also the name of one of my bandmates' kids is Shy, Adam. Jazz pianist with lots of guest vocalists, singing in English. Great, intimate, sparse, kind of fusion-y jazz sound. I love the song Seattle, and also the song Strange Magic. I would recommend those. I could listen to his stuff all day. I may put it on when I'm done all these recordings today. Think of Brad Meldau, or even to some extent, one of my faves, George Winston, and you'll kind of get a sense of how Shy Maestro sounds. Even Robert Glasper, I'll say. Static and Ben L., finally, mainstream pop and hip-hop with major folk elements. They sing and rap in Hebrew. Also, great sound. I don't know exactly what I would say that they sound like. It's kind of hard to get a parallel there. But if you like, if you like kind of hip-hop with interesting folk elements, you will like Static and Ben L. I would recommend the song Sil Sulim and Hakol Letova. So as you can see, today's Israeli music spans everything from global EDM scenes to jazz to indie to folk. Tel Aviv is a major hub, of course, of the music there and of stylistic hybridity. Some midpoint conclusions before we get towards the end of this first part here. As far as their history, they had shared origins, which then diverged. They started in the same musical ecosystem and gradually split due to history, politics, religion, cultural alignment. There were two different centers of gravity. Of course, Israeli music eventually was aligned with Europe and global pop, and Palestinian music is largely connected to the Arab world, but in recent years has also started to align itself with global sounds like hip hop and things like that. Tradition never disappears. Even in modern forms, both Israeli and Palestinian music contain a lot of traditional folk elements. It's similar to a lot of the countries I mentioned in my Music from Other Countries episode. And music is always a part of the identity of a country, and that's the case, of course, here. Both traditions have shared ancient roots. They diverged to the mid to late 20th century, like pretty much the whole 20th century, but then are reconverging through globalization despite what is happening today. That's why you can hear two artists from opposite sides and still recognize the same uses of scales and emotional phrasing and the regional music is very similar. Of course, they're telling different stories and often in different languages. They'll both also sing in English or rap in English here sometimes. And again, in part 2, when I do side-by-side comparisons of artists from both countries, you'll get more of that sense. So my favorites here from Israel are Garden City Movement, Infected Mushroom, Noga Erez, Lola Marsh, Netta, Ravid Plotnik, and Shy Maestro. I would look up all of I think that's like half of the artists I mentioned. Look them all up because there might be ones you like I didn't like as much. Those are my favorites though. Questions for you. Did the histories help give you perspective? Who are your favorite Israeli artists? I'd like to know the answers to these. As a reminder, by the way, in part 2 next week, I will be doing modern Palestinian artists, a handful of cross-border bands who have members from both countries, side-by-side comparisons of a bunch of bands from multiple genres in both countries. I'm going to give you some global conclusions and then more questions and a challenge for you next week. And that's after the part 2. This was the end of part 1. I'd love to know what you think about it. As always, my objectives here are music, conversation, and connection. Thank you for hanging with me. And stay tuned for part 2 next week.